Hi, my name is Andreas, and today I want to show you how to convert hex values to RGB with JavaScript. So for that, the first thing we need is a hex value. So let me define the color red in hex, and a hex color always consists out of the red, the green, and the blue value. So in our case, that would be FF0000. So when we want now the RGB value, we first need to split here in exactly these pairs. And to do this, we will use a regular expression. I will define a new variable RGB, and then on the hex variable, we call the match method with our regular expression. And our regular expression should find all matches, and we want any character except line breaks for 1 to 2 times. And when I put this now in a console log, we should get our pairs FF00 and 00. So if I execute it, we will exactly see this log. So now we have it already splitted, but still in the hexadecimal notation. So we need to convert it to an integer. And what we can use here is the method parseInt on these values. So when we say, for example, the red value would be here on the index 0. If I run it again, we only get the red value. And for this, if we want now the RGB version, so the integer version, we pass int, so we use this method, and the second parameter, the radix, we pass 16 to convert from the hexadecimal to a decimal number. So we see we get 255 out. When I do the same on the green value, which is 00, and execute it, you'll see we get a 0 out. So this seems to be fine. So all we need to do now is we define a new variable with our RGB array, and we can put the separate values in. So I pass int on the red value, so RGB 0, with the radix of 16 to get the integer value, pass int of first value, the green one, again with 16, and then the last one would be the blue value, also 00 in our case, with the radix of 16. If we now print this in the console, we get back an array with our RGB values. So in this way, you can convert a hex value to RGB. Let's see now if we, instead of red, take blue. So 0000FF would be blue, and we run it, we get the correct version out. Now, let's see for edge cases. So in hex notation for colors, also a shortcode of 3 values is possible, something like F00, which would then actually mean FF0000. So what happens when we pass this value now? Let's see. Get a null at the last RGB value, so the blue. Why? When we put a console log here again for the RGB, we will see that the split still happens between 1 and 2 characters. We have exactly 3 characters. So what happens here is the first 2 characters come in the first match, the last character in the second. And then for the third entry in this array, we do not have anything, so we get a null back. Of course, we also want to handle this colors, So what would we do? Before we do our match here, we need to check how many characters this hex value has. So we use the bench method here and check if it's 3. And if it's 3, then we will replace it. So from basically F00 to FF0000. So how we do that is by simply calling on the hex the replace method. And what do we replace? We use a regex again for any character except the line break, but this time maximum 1. So we could do it like this, and then also all the matches, and then we want to replace these by doubling each match, and for that what we need to do here is we add 2 times the value because we want to double it, and when we then print it we get the correct value again. So in this way also the shortcodes work, but now let's test another edge case. Let's pass more. So we have a normal hex code which would work, and now let's pass an additional character, 2 additional characters. It would still work, but we do not have a valid color here. So it's still, as we are using only first to third index, so 0 to 2, we only get the correct color, and this is ignored, but still what we get passed is not a valid hex color. And we maybe want to check that first, so we would pass another check here again for the length of hex and say if it's not 6 and hex is not 3, then let's throw an error, only hex values with 3 or 6 digits allowed. Now if we do this and run it again, we will get our error thrown, which we can fetch, and if I remove it, it will be correct, and if we go back to 3, it will be also correct, just that now we have set red and green to F, so we get 255 to 55 0. What of course now also needs to be considered is that even though we check for 3 or 6 characters, what we don't check is if a user, for example, puts a Z or a T in here and runs it, it would still tell us no error because the length requirement is fulfilled. It would still make out of the shortcode the full version FFZZTT, but the conversion would fail. So how to avoid this? We would do another check before we do our transformation. I just extend this if by else if, and here we check again via match our hex value, and this time in the regular expression we check for certain characters, so A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C, D, F lowercase, and 0 till 9, and these characters should appear 3 to 6 times. The check for the exact length 3 or 6 is already mentioned here, so we can throw another error message here saying hex value out of bounds. So if we execute this, we will still get the message. Why do we still get the message? We need to check this, and we need to check this if it's null. Because if it's null, we do not have a match, and if we do not have a match, we want to throw our error. So now this value is also not allowed, even if we write something like this. It should throw us an error. It doesn't, so there's still something missing. Let's see what's the issue. So what we need to do here is we need to check the matches. So let's call the console log and call. So what we see is get a match, but the match is only 5 characters long. So it stripped the last one out. So we got a match, but the match is not in the correct length. So how do we avoid this? So what we need to do here is for the check, basically we need to check the result of our match and we need to check the first result of our match. So we can check here, and to do that we move the match out of the if and we define a new variable, check HEX, and then we see first of all that check HEX equals null or check HEX and then the first entry, because we want the first range is not 3 and check HEX range is not 6. This we need to put in brackets to separate it from our OR statement. And now let's run it again. So we get no mistake. We put it back and we get a mistake. We directly only pass our G values and we get a separate error message for that. So in this way, we now have created, let me remove the console logs except the last one, our code for converting from hex to RGB. And now let's move it into a function so that we can call it from any value. So we would have a function convert to RGB. The hex value can be passed. And in this function, we move now our logic to check the values, to resolve the shortcode, and then to convert to RGB. So let me put it in our function, and then at the end, we return the RGB array. So all we need to do here now for our console log to still work is call our convert to RGB function and pass the hex value. And now we see the RGB array is not defined. Let's see where the issue comes from. So we have the RGB value here, and here is our old console log we need to remove. So let's do that and run it, and we see the correct value. Now if you want to execute this on any string, you could put it for the strings in a prototype function. So instead of defining a function like this, we could say string.prototype.convert to RGB equals function. We do not need to pass hex, we get it as this. So we would say hex equals this. And then on any string, we could call now our convert to RGB. This I need to actually put now in the console log because it's just returning array. It's not printing anything. Let's remove the old one and reload. We get the correct value. Okay, and this was the tutorial how to convert hex to RGB with JavaScript. I hope it was helpful for you. Thank you. Bye.